Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is Film and Family, a podcast about feature filmmaking for professionals in the film industry with families. Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in.
Awesome. So today we have our great friend Redge Flake here with us. We're going to interview him and talk a little bit about his experience going through sort of a prototype Film and Family Academy. And also we'll just be discussing whatever topics are interesting to the group of us. But welcome to the podcast, Reg.
Well, thank you. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
We had the great pleasure of hosting Reg and his wife, Marissa, just a few weeks ago in our home and showing them around. They're considering moving out to Georgia and checking out the film industry out here. So we thought it'd be fun to get together one more time and do a podcast.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. We basically stayed in your Airbnb and paid you to be our friends for a weekend. And, you know, it was a delight. No, it was really good. It was very, very fair trade if there was, if that was what it was going to be.
So this actually brings up the other enrollment that, we wanted to mention is that we have this new Pay Us to Be Your Friends program. And it's anyone who wants to pay us really whatever amount of money you want. We can be friends. So that's all there is to it.
Reg has joined us in that.
He was our first protege. And we're great friends, so it's gone well so far.
Yeah, it was very real, very honest, and
all paid for.
Worth for it. Worth every cent. Worth every cent.
Oh man, no, it was actually really awesome having you guys, and we felt like we were a quick bond. So I don't know, what do we want to talk about in terms of Georgia?
I just wanted to talk about Georgia a little bit, just because we have wanted to do a podcast about the film industry in Georgia. And this seemed like a good opportunity with Reg, who just came and visited, and we got to kind of show it off to him. So we'll just start this episode by talking about that a little bit.
We're not funded by the state of Georgia or by the Georgia film industry. Just
in case you're wondering, because, some of us didn't even know that film existed in Georgia. I didn't know that for a while.
For a few years ago you didn't, but I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not know. At this point, yeah, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be rude.
I think that, people watch a movie and they see the Georgia peach at the end, go bing, and they go, oh, that's cool. It's filmed in Georgia. And then, if they're like fans of The Walking Dead, they might know that it was filmed in Georgia. But then after that, they kind of don't really think about it or make that association or take the time to look into it. But it sounds like if you want to find a major film hub that is also a place where you can live cheap, or at least decently, Georgia is probably one of the only really big places like that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people don't sit through credits long enough to even see the sticker at the end. We always sit through the full credits, and we're the last ones in the theater. So,
in fact,
it's all those people waiting for that movie after the movie, the little clip after the movie. You're like, oh, what's going to be? And then it's like, oh, there's the Georgia peach. So you have to see that before you can get there. So
the post-credits scene. Well, and if you're a big Marvel movie fan, then you'll get both. So that's a good point.
Yeah, smart to do that. So first of all, we'll talk briefly about why we chose to move to Georgia.
Basically, I said, I think there's film in Georgia, and Anna said, okay, let's go. That was the
short
decision.
Version. Yeah. No, we were looking at New York City, and we were looking at LA, and we were in Utah. That's where we went to school, and just kind of trying to decide where we wanted to go.
We were already parents. That was the big factor.
Yeah, we couldn't probably even afford to live in Georgia, much less LA or New York. We might have to pause for a second here. Reg was saying we should just record the kids screaming and it'd be more real, like Film and Family.
Yeah, it probably
There's the family part. So if you do hear kids screaming, that's what that is.
We'll have them on the podcast sometime.
Yeah, we have been meaning to do that, actually.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, I think it was partly because we had a family and partly because there was film partly because it was good weather, and
it felt right to us. We just felt like we needed to do it.
So
weather was a big part of it.
So when Reg and Marissa, you guys came out, we first did a little small studio tour. And there are a lot of small studios like that in Georgia. They've kind of popped up all over the place. I actually can't remember what it was called even.
Oh, well.
But
there are tons of small facilities.
Those. And then we drove you guys around and showed you Trilith Studios.
Formerly Pinewood.
Yep. They've just rebranded. It's owned by Dan Cathy, who also owns Chick-fil-A. If you love Chick-fil-A, you'll love Georgia because there's a Chick-fil-A on almost every corner. And... yeah, we kind of drove around. They have first of all, state-of-the-art sound stages and technology. They have now the same LED screens that they did The Mandalorian on.
They have those at Trilith now?
Yeah, they have those now.
Surprise me.
And they're building like this community right next to it, which is worth looking up and checking out because it's this beautiful little village of European-style homes. And... they're trying to create a place where creatives can live and work really close to where they live. And it's kind of a cool thing they've got going.
Yeah, it's very beautiful and even cheaper probably still than houses in California.
or maybe Utah, because houses are pretty expensive here. Yeah, they're probably comparable at least.
Yeah.
But we kind of looked at some of them. So
yeah, you guys would know. You're in that market right now. And then we checked out neighboring cities. There's also like Fayetteville and Sonoy. Sonoy's famous for The Walking Dead. So they do Walking Dead tours there. And
have we specified that we live in Peachtree cities?
I don't know if we have.
We said neighboring cities.
Yeah, we live in Peachtree City, Georgia. It's the best. We love it.
It might be the best. It might literally be the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not everyone will think that Peachtree City is the best. We all here on the podcast today have shared that commonality that we think it's the best, but that's okay.
We're a little biased.
Georgia in general, I really like. South Atlanta, I really like that whole general area. But a lot of people live north of Atlanta. A lot of people live downtown. Film is really active if you live downtown, especially if you're into commercial film. If you're a cinematographer or a sound mixer and you move to Atlanta, you're going to be busy. You'll be busy if you're good, especially if you're a sound mixer and you know what you're doing. You'll be very, very busy.
So, Reg, I'd like to hear, first of all, we should probably tell everyone how we met in the first place, and then maybe a little bit about why you're considering moving here with your family.
Okay. Well, we met at the LDS Film Festival. You guys were coming, you had a little short film in one of the programs there, and I was just commenting after the fact that it was a good film and started chatting with you and another friend, a film friend of mine. We were chatting with you and then started talking about Georgia and how cool it was. And then I'm not sure exactly why we connected beyond that, but you just mentioned your coaching to us. And I think I thought I was really interested in how you did it and then connected from there, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you mentioned at the time that you also had a big family. You had 6 kids. And I remember being like, whoa, that's pretty impressive for someone in film.
I think that my buddy probably threw that out there and he has 6 kids. But yeah. We're not your average filmmaker family because, we've got a lot of kids and it does provide a challenge to being successful in the industry, or at least successful in the way that I want to be. I think that getting a job as a filmmaker isn't really that difficult these days. It's actually a very high demand thing. If you can prove you have some skill set in any realm of it, you can usually find a job, but that's often in corporate video or something like that. You're working for a small business even, so.
So what are your goals? And just to follow up, what is exactly the challenge in your mind of having a big family and being in the film industry? It's kind of 2 questions.
I totally forgot the first part of that question.
What are your goals? You were saying having a big family is difficult to have success in the film industry, at least success in the way I want to have it. So I was just going to ask you, what is the success that you have in the film industry and why is it hard to have a big family?
Well, I I want to make films, movies, and I mostly want to be those to be mine, but I'm open to, being involved in other people's projects as well. I say I want my own partially because if I work for other people, often I have to compromise my ability to spend time with my family. Especially when you have a big family, they require a little bit more attention. And I think anybody wants to have a life and a career. And I think that oftentimes people in the film industry sacrifice family for the career. And whether that's they actually have a family and they just don't spend time with them and eventually lose them, or they choose not to have a family to have a career. And I already had a family. I decided to have a family way before I decided to be a filmmaker. And so then it was like, how am I going to do this with a family? And that's always been the pursuit and the goal, is doing it with a family. And I've said no to so many jobs that you'd be amazed. People probably would slap me upside the head and be like, what are you thinking? That's such an awesome opportunity. But it's just been like, well, yeah, but then I'll have to work 12-hour days to 14-hour days because I'll probably have to drive an hour there and an hour back. And then I won't have time for my family. And the reality was, it was impossible. My wife would kill me. No, but I wouldn't do that. And so that's the real challenge. And so making my own films is actually the reason why that's part of the goal, is because I have more control over, what I do, how I spend my time.
I think we can obviously relate to that to a large degree. Everyone's lives are different and everyone's situations are a little different. So there's no right or wrong way. Some people might have families and decide to work 12 or 14-hour days, and spouse, husband or wife might be like, yeah, I want to support you in that, and you should do that. Other marital dynamics might not be the same. And we're kind of like you, Reg, that, yeah, we were like, there wasn't one of us that were like, yeah, go do that 14-hour day thing and we'll just hold the fort down here. I think we both had goals and we both said, let's try and figure out a way to make this work without, doing this potentially forever thing where you're just always working, and how do you know when you're ever going to get out of that? And so, yeah, what you're saying is that you want to find a way to make them not mutually exclusive. Like, can I have this big priority, which is family, and have this big priority, which is a filmmaking career, and not, how do I find and maintain a balance there that looks a certain way? And that's going to look a little different for everyone, but I think that's really cool. And I think it's cool that you're willing to kind of just say, no, I believe that there's this vision that I have out there of a life in this that I can eventually realize. I don't have to just say, well, it's this or nothing. I'll go along with whatever flow presents itself in front of me. You're kind of trying to pioneer whatever it is you feel like you need to make your life look like. And so we obviously hyper relate to that. but yeah.
So you said that you got into film after you had a family. How did you get into film, and when was that?
Well, I made short films in high school and when I was a kid or whatever. And I always wanted to be like, I acted in high school, so I wanted to be an actor for a long time. I thought that'd be really cool. And there's still like, a little bit of like, it'd be fun to be in my own movies a little bit or whatever. But I originally, like, my original plan of graduating high school or whatever was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a filmmaker. But back then it was really, and it still is a little bit, but there was this sort of like, you can't be a successful filmmaker. That's like a pipe dream, and going into film was like dangerous. And so in my head, I was like, well, I'll do it smart. I'll go get a business degree and then I'll be a filmmaker. And now it's not really necessary now. I mean, it's still very smart, but there's so much work in film related things. Like, if there's video for everything. And so it's not really like a sketchy thing to do. But when I was at that point, it was still kind of culturally a sketchy job to pursue. And so, I got back from an LDS mission and I went and got that business degree and got married and had some kids. And while I was pursuing my degree, and then somewhere in there, I kind of like, oh, maybe I don't want to do film. I had other kind of pursuits and ideas and things that I was interested in. And so I kind of went back and forth. And then eventually I was in a job that I really didn't want, and it was like, I really want to do something different. And we were talking about it and just decided, you know what, I really just want to do film, and why not? So just kind of had some faith that this could work out, and I jumped into it and went full tilt. I mean, full tilt in the sense that I made sacrifices for sure for my family, made sacrifices even, but I've been working and or schooling in film for the last 6 or 7 years almost.
Oh, I think that's awesome.
Yeah. So we're currently open for enrollment in our Film and Family Academy, which is a little different than what you went through. You went through a very early version of that where it was just the 6 weeks of private coaching. But I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your experience with that. What did it look like before you did it? And what did your life look like after? Was it different?
If you were to look at just outwardly, like, okay, I have probably one more kid than I did then, or maybe I don't know. Maybe was a baby then, you know. But if you looked outwardly, my life isn't, you know, a ton different, and even my film career isn't a lot different at this point. But I definitely feel more empowered. So when I started, you know, like I had a tendency to be extremely overwhelmed by life in general, which, I mean, you can't always escape, and I think we all kind of go through that. But now I am a much less overwhelmed person. And I feel very, I don't know, there's this time when you feel like you can put all your energy into something. And when you like experience after the fact, like, man, I really was in that. I really did good. You feel really empowered. And I feel like I have that more often. I feel more like 100% or 90% more often than, you know, other times. And so my employment has actually changed a little bit. And I actually do less film than I was doing when I first started, just because I'm making money for my family and whatnot. You know,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a promotion, and that promotion has allowed me to kind of practice that sort of stuff that I learned in a way, because there's so many projects and tasks that I have to do each day. I'm a manager of a business and involved with a lot of people and a lot of things going on at the same time, like hundreds of customers. And it's not like a retail environment. You know, it's like a service for businesses. And so there's a lot of people to please, and it could get overwhelming, but I tend to be able to just accept. That's part of the thing. Before, I probably couldn't really accept things not getting done, or maybe accept myself for who I was at the moment in time. Now it's a lot easier to just, hey, you know what, that's just how it goes. I'm much more accepting of reality. And I think that's kind of the foundation of what I learned, is just how to think in a way that have a perspective that helps you function better. And so like right now, it's really a logistical thing for film for me. If the logistics of my life was a little different right now, I don't feel like I would have any trouble being successful. And I'm getting close logistically. I'm getting close to where I'll be ready. I'll be able to do that. But that's kind of where I'm at. But before I started the coaching, I was probably a little bit more like, you know, if I had the time to do film, I might have the gumption or the confidence to do it. But I was a lot less. I was not as confident about my confidence as I am now. I feel very, very prepared to be successful.
Yeah, well, you know what I think is really interesting, Reg, is that you said two things that almost seem contradictory. You said, I'm more accepting of reality, but at the same time, I see you and you're considering moving to Georgia without a job or many contacts in Georgia. Luckily, you have a few more than we did. And so that, on the one hand, you're accepting of reality, but I guess the reality that you mentioned was of who you are right now, I think is the wording you used, which I think is an important thing. But you're also considering making a move that would not look like, I mean, we were just there. People asked us, so you do you have a job lined up for you out there? And I said, no. Do you have family out in Georgia? No. And they're like, do you have a lot of contacts out there? And I said, we don't know a soul in that whole state, you guys. Like, we're just going to go. We're going to go. We're going to figure it out. And yeah, I mean, it was hard, but we figured it out. And so, you know, when you described that, I thought, to some degree, you're not accepting of reality, you're creating your own reality. And I think that's also what you're describing when you say before it was like you were in this waiting game. Maybe, if these circumstances line up, and now you're like, I'm almost there and I'm creating it. We're getting steps closer. So I've experienced similar shifts in my life. And even recently, I feel like I've been experiencing shifts and sort of this feeling of, all right, I'm going to make my life look the way I want it to look. And I'm just going to do it, and that's an exciting thing.
Yeah, I think empowering is a great word that you used that describes really well what I felt as well. Like, learning some of these tools, it just feels like, okay, I can make this happen. I don't have to wait around for someone to do it for me. I can just move forward. But
yeah, I think just on the same tone of what you guys are talking about, it's the word that's coming to my mind is risks. I'm more accepting of the end result of something that happens. So that actually makes me more risk tolerant. It's kind of weird because I'm more willing to take risks, but I'm also more willing to accept the results. So I feel like it's two-sided because, yeah, I'm like, things aren't perfect, but I'm okay with that. And then I'm also willing to do things that are crazy or might be construed as crazy because I know that now I can accept the risk. Okay, maybe I won't get what I want. You know what? That's actually okay. That's weird. But I'm also more confident that I will get what I want. So it's interesting.
Confident enough to try for it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, otherwise you wouldn't risk it all if you didn't believe.
Well, so many of us are stuck in this perfectionist trap where we just aren't moving forward because we want it to be perfect and we're so afraid of failing. But then we don't progress because we're not trying and failing, which is how we learn and grow. So yeah, that makes total sense.
So let's backtrack a little bit, Reg. What did this look like? We were just talking about, you did this sort of it's not exactly what Film and Family Academy is now, but you did 6 weeks of essentially coaching with Anna. And that was it. I mean, it didn't include, the program now includes a lot of coursework, other resources. It's twice as long. It's 12 weeks of coaching, and it's also...
And then there's ongoing support after that.
Ongoing support with sort of the group coaching and whatnot. And so you just got this isolated 6-week coaching experience. What did that look like? And what about that experience led to, I guess, what you just described? Because I feel like that was, in my mind, a little bit of a gap of...
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I didn't really go, well, what happened was, I just kind of said, this is before and this is after. And that you're like, well, okay, what happened in between?
Yeah.
I think, that's the best part of the movie, but also the hardest part to write. So really, I think I'm a fairly self-aware person, but I would say a big part of this coaching is trying to teach someone to become self-aware. And that's not, it wasn't prescribed to me that way per se, but that's my sort of summary of what happened there was I became more self-aware. And so, sometimes you see yourself, but the way people see you is very different. And if you can back away from yourself a little bit and see from another perspective, you start to go, oh, I guess I am that way. Or I guess, and so I think Anna didn't really necessarily do that either. She didn't really say specific things about me. In fact, she didn't really give me any advice either. I shouldn't say that. There was some, but it wasn't like, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. It was, hey, have you thought about it this way? And once I thought about it this way, I was giving myself advice, right? I was like, oh yeah, really it's like the way I think, once I start analyzing the way I think, and part of this is the way you feel is based on the way you think. You're actually creating these feelings yourself essentially because of the way you think. And if you can backstep and get to the point where this is the way I think, I basically found out, and it was actually, I would say there was one moment, very specific moment where I was like, this is an incorrect way of thinking. My way of thinking, it's not helping me. It's very, very much detrimental to what I want. And it was really simple. Once I realized the way I should think, Anna didn't say, you should think this way. It was just, I was analyzing the way I think because of the tools she gave me and essentially the questions she was asking me. And once I analyzed that, I realized, oh, at the heart of it, to me, there was this compelling idea that I should do this and I need to do this. And all the tasks and things in my life were very much important, and they were all on this important list. And it was a list, and I felt like I had to get them all done. And so you're constantly going like, feeling like, well, that's way too much to do for a normal human being and to be sane. And then also it's feeling guilty and feeling shame or feeling inadequate or feeling like, you're not getting the results you want. And I think that once you go, I realized I don't need to do anything. There's no should either. To me, that's the way of thinking that was wrong. And my new way of thinking was, I could do this. Do I want to do this? And it actually came down to, I determined that I'm only going to do the things that I want to do, which some people would be like, that's really selfish. You've got 6 kids and a wife. And the truth is I want my kids to be happy. And I want, so I choose things, I make choices that I want to do to bring about some of those results that I want. And so you could be very unselfish and do only the things you want to do. But I guess that's the main thought process that changed in me. And that sounds so simple, but it took the engaging in this process to click that into my head.
Well, I mean, you say it sounds simple, and I've been living this, with Anna, watching, I listen to all this coaching coursework and explanations of the model, which is kind of the tool that you were just explaining about. Thoughts create emotions, and emotions drive our actions, which create our results. And even just your explaining of it just now, I feel like was a perspective on it that I haven't heard articulated quite in that exact way. And so, yeah, I can tell that it's hit home for you because of this idea that you could do only things you want and still be a very unselfish person or selfless person. I've never heard that said in quite that way before. I actually really like that. I think that's really profound. And I think that comes down to who we are. And I think that many of us are better people in our core than maybe we want to admit or realize. And maybe some of us have things deep down in our core that we want that we realize is something we don't want to want, but I find myself that there's a lot of duality within me. I kind of want 2 things that are very opposite each other. And I just have to say, well, I got to pick what part of me I want to follow and whatnot. But I think you're right, Reg. I think you're right. It is possible to do only things you want and be a really selfless person because we've learned or developed wants that are noble and are serving other people in various degrees in various ways. And I think I learned that, not just the obvious stuff like what you just said. Well, not everything you said was obvious, but one of the things you said was, I actually want my kids to be happy and take care of them. I think we all want that. But then sometimes we get into this mode where we're like, if my kids weren't so demanding and if I didn't have all these other responsibilities, I could focus on these other things more. And I think that, what was my point? Oh, even in terms of film and such, I've realized to see those wants differently and feel like I want to help people. I want to help as many people as possible. And that means all the people that are going to get hired on a feature film if I produce it and raise the money for it, all the people that are going to be affected by the story, all the people that I'm going to come in contact with for hopefully have a good influence on, and whatever degree, I'm thinking of it in light of the good and the service I can do in the world and the help I can offer other people. And in that way, what would seem like a selfish, career-driven, maybe even ambitious desire, I guess I'm starting to feel different about those ambitions and start to feel more about it's a desire to connect with and help other people. So I really like what you just shared there. And I think that's really awesome that, frankly, sometimes those things don't stick. And so it's really exciting to see that this was over a year ago?
I know, I was going to say, it's been a long time. And as you bring this up, do you remember how long it was?
I think it's before COVID. So I think it was the summer before COVID. So it was July or June 2019.
Yeah.
So.
Was it really that long ago?
So it was a while ago, because you did have a baby, a young baby at that time, and now your wife is pregnant with your 7th child.
Yeah. So I was at 6. Yeah, I was at 6. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So the point is that 2 years after, it seems like you've remembered some of the major core things, and that you're still making big decisions based on what would seem like a very simple model, but you've internalized it to a degree that it's actually shaping life decisions, which I think that's remarkable.
I think so too. I'm actually shocked that you remember so much, because it's been so long, and unlike the program now, there's not like ongoing, support. We haven't talked about this for however long. And yet, as you bring up these things, and I won't share anything from our private sessions, but I'm remembering instances where those things came up and where we worked through them, and I'm remembering in a lot more detail now some of the things that you mentioned. So that's pretty cool.
I think it's awesome. I think it's honestly, we didn't even talk about any of this stuff when you guys visited. We just pretty much talked about the logistics of moving and looking at houses and looking at the the communities and whatnot. And we showed each other films and stuff that we'd worked on, and but we didn't really talk about the coaching or the model or the principles or anything like that in any detail. I don't even remember bringing it up, frankly. Yeah, I'm amazed that you remember so much, and that you remember it in such detail that you basically just described some of the most central core focuses of shoulds, and
could instead of should,
and like the model itself, and just the reanalyzing of the thinking. And frankly, you touched on what I think is the most, probably what we all have the instant misconception of whatever the word life coaching means, which is like, what are you, just like sitting on the sidelines telling me what to do and where to kick the ball and like what decisions to make in my life? And it really is the exact opposite. It's like you really have all the power over your life, and you can make whatever decision you want. And usually what we are doing is we're blocking ourselves from making the decisions we want because we're judging ourselves or we're judging the decision. And these are all optional thoughts. And like you're saying, you started to consciously make choices about your thoughts, and that started to change what you were able to. And
even become aware that the thoughts you were thinking didn't align with your beliefs or your results that you wanted ultimately.
Yeah.
That's a good realization to have.
Yeah, I think it's weird because it's like, I think that, other than going to therapy or something, and therapy is usually focused on a very acute or at least a negative sort of thing aspect. And so like, I wouldn't have ever said, oh man, I really could use therapy in my life. I've got some major problems. Not that you can't go to therapy and deal with even like simpler things, or whatever. I mean, we all got stuff. But I'd never really done anything like that. And I think that I find most people probably haven't, where you're focusing on you in a way, but it's a weird kind of thing because it's like, yeah, it's weird because you're not trying to fix yourself per se, but you do, hopefully. I don't know. I guess it could be simply just taking some time to go, hey, I need to think about what I do and who I am and the way I think. Taking that time, which I think sometimes people are just like, I go to work and I go home and I do what I have to do. And life is just so crazy. They don't stop and go, let's ponder for a moment. Let's think for a moment. Let's question something instead of just living, instead of like letting life happen, you kind of go, okay, and just taking that a minute. Sometimes I think that just that part of it is probably significant.
Yeah. So coaching is like guided, intense pondering.
Well, even if you did sit down, you might not know how to. But
how to navigate the mind.
It is more like present and future focused. You can bring up stuff in the past, but only if it's bothering you now in the future or affecting you right now in the present. But like
affecting you now in the future.
I'm in the present, sorry.
Yeah, and how I've heard it described is like therapy is for, not always, but often therapy is for someone struggling with some sort of mental or emotional illness or whatever, and that's not bad. Most of us, I think, are going to have to, at some point, either short or long period in our lives, going to deal with a degree of mental or emotional imbalance of some kind. And so therapy is a wonderful resource, but coaching is really about anyone who is emotionally or mentally stable or healthy, but they're wanting to accomplish something more or different, and those changes don't feel accessible the progress or the results, whatever it is that they want in their life, seem unattainable, or they feel stuck. They don't feel, it's not really necessarily for anyone who's feeling suicidal or feeling major depression or who needs medication. That's not what coaching is for.
It could be used in conjunction with that, but it's like the difference between a physical therapist versus a coach in athletics. A physical therapist is there to help you recover from some sort of injury or problem, whereas the coach is there to help you progress and improve your performance.
Maximize your performance.
Towards a goal or towards whatever.
I like how you describe it.
And no dig on therapy, but I think that sometimes it's better not to focus on the actual problem itself. It's weird. It's a strange thing, but sometimes we think and spend so much time on the thing that happened or the thing that we're dealing with that's pervading our mind, when sometimes the way to get past something is to think forward or to think about something more positive or something like that. I think that sometimes with people with addictions, they tend to talk and think about their addiction so much that it's becoming even bigger part of their life than when they were just in the addiction, right? I feel like you're more likely to fall back into that if you keep making it such a big part of your life. Whereas I feel like people who make something more of their life, say, choose something that they want to pervade in their mind, something positive to focus on, sometimes those things just fix themselves. And I think that with coaching, it's kind of like that. You want to peak performance, and you're not so much worried about the thing that is, like the injury that you have, but you're focused on the progression of what you can do. And for me, there was an injury. Like the injury in my head was, I was thinking that I was required, that there was an obligation to do all these things in my life. And since I wasn't doing all those things, I was bad. Like I wasn't good. I wasn't good enough. And so I fixed that, but it wasn't necessarily because I specifically was thinking, what's my problem? I was thinking like, what do I want? And how do I get that? And then, oh, that's actually stopped me, or I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of times that's a move that people have to make, from looking at something in the past and blaming it and just feeling sad about this thing is causing all my problems, to moving into, well, how do I overcome it? How do I rise above and move forward? And for a little while, if you experience something traumatic, you may need to stay there for a little while and just process all the emotion and experience it and let it go through you.
And therapy can be really good.
Therapy can help you do that, but at a certain point, you're ready to move on.
But going back to the metaphor, it's like the best thing for me is not to listen to whatever my coach tells me to do. If I have like a broken leg, I should probably get off the field, and actually go to a doctor, But if the leg is healed, but I'm super nervous, if I'm playing the game like, oh, if I do anything remotely like what I did before, I'm going to break my leg again, or I'm going to my knee, or I'm going to throw my knee out or bust my ACL or whatever. It's like if I start to play and define my play based off of that past thing, like you were saying, like if I define myself by it, then that's not going to serve me at all. You could never do well in a sport if you're constantly in fear of something that happened in the past that you're healed from. And some of us might think we're not healed from it, and I think that it's scar tissue. It's not actually injury anymore, and we need to move on. So, and that takes some wisdom to know where you are at, because it's not as easy to tell. Broken legs are pretty easy to figure out. But,
sure.
But anyway, I like the. I sometimes overextend metaphors, but I like them. I like this metaphor.
I think it's also amazing is like sometimes there's a lot of peripheral concerns, and people to talk about like there's the tree and then there's the branches and all that, and there's when the core, like your core like thinking changes, a lot of these other things just they're no longer concerns. And so I think you were mentioning the fear of something, like really when you start to like make your thinking more, I don't know how you say this, like I say better root. If you're getting at that root of that thinking, like I found that lots of these feelings that you might have are no longer there. These other ones that you weren't targeting either. Like I didn't say to Anna, like the feeling that that stops me from doing all these things is fear, but yet it was there somewhere. We knew it was there somewhere. Like I knew fear stops me in some form or whatever, but that wasn't what I was like targeting. It was like, I feel this way. I feel overwhelmed. And I don't want to feel that way. I want to feel confident in what I am accomplishing and what I want to accomplish. And so then when I started aligning my thinking to that sort of thing, all of a sudden I was less afraid. Like we were saying, I'm more willing to take a risk. That's not what I was going for, but I got a lot more out of it. I was able to uncover and fix a lot of things by just fixing one thing, you know.
I think that's really profound. I think that that's something that we almost always across the board see with all clients in the Film and Family Academy and in our own lives, is that when you take 6 to 12 weeks to implement the tools of the model and focus on one particular thing, you don't want to try and dump your whole life in front of you and say, I'm going to fix everything or I'm going to change everything or I'm going to improve every single aspect. It's just pick one very specific aspect, one part of your thinking, and then you start to notice that in either small ways or big ways, every aspect improves. And I've noticed that recently in my life. I've been focusing on, ironically, we started doing a new round of coaching, and Anna actually coaches me, which might sound funny, but
I wish you could coach me too. Sometimes you do.
I need to go get certified as a life coach. I really do. We'll do that later.
I'll coach you.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But the focus was our marriage. I wanted to focus on that relationship, and so I don't know. And that's extra strange, right? Like that my wife is coaching me on how to improve my marriage. Maybe we should all learn from that. But really, she steps out and becomes very impersonal in a good way and is able to really look objectively at my thoughts and whatnot. But then recently, I've been finding myself improving my thoughts significantly about myself in professional ways. And it's changing the way I look at my work. It's changing the way I make decisions about when I work and when I don't work. And I've actually become a lot more determined to work more and to focus in different ways. And frankly, very similar to what you were just describing, Reg, I've stopped judging myself about some of the priorities or aspirations that I feel and stopped feeling bad about, certain things about work. And strangely, that has been like this major factor in improving my relationship with my wife and kids. And I'm actually I don't know if I'm working more. Maybe I am. But I'm certainly focusing more on that right now in my life. And yet, I think the biggest thing, that the side effect was that I've kind of backed off and just said, when I'm working, and I'm just going to have to trust Anna and the kids and everyone to figure out whatever it is they need to do. And it's actually increased my trust and my respect in those people in my family. And I don't feel like I need to micromanage my family or do anything. And that's actually helped them feel less micromanaged, which is always helpful in life. And so anyway, I'm probably not being super clear, but improving a professional way of thinking, thoughts that were related to my professional life, had major impacts immediately on what I perceived as my family life. And so I just love that, what you're saying, where it seems like all these branches that maybe seem related or not related, but yeah, when you start to affect one big part of your life, everything inevitably improves. The thing is that most of us never pointedly focus on our thoughts surrounding any part of our lives, because it's a paradigm and it's a mindset and it's a tool. The model specifically is what I'm referring to, that most of us are unaware of. We're unaware of how our brains are creating our emotions through our thoughts, and we're unaware of how to use and implement that. It's extremely easy to understand.
Well, and you're your own worst enemy, and I think that most people offhandedly agree with that. But when you realize how you really are your own worst enemy, you go oh, I can change. It's actually really empowering. That's the empowering part. It's I have the ability to change the way I feel. And sometimes we feel like this is my life and I have to, I can't do anything about it, and you don't. You can do anything. It's cool. Honestly, if I said very specifically what's different from my life now and then, the reality is my life is very similar in circumstance, and it's very similar in my success in film is not much. It's not really any different, but the way I feel about all of that, my family and everything, and where I've applied this kind of it's applied to everything. So it's not I just feel different. That's the main thing, is I feel different about it. And that's, for me, that's a huge win, because it's about quality of life, not necessarily quantity of life, so what, I haven't made that feature film yet, or I haven't done this yet, or at least I feel good about being awake every day and doing whatever I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always where it starts. It's always an internal change before anyone sees the external and the results start to come in. And, when you did this, it wasn't focused on film really at all. It was kind of its own separate thing for filmmakers who want to improve how they feel in their personal life. So now we are really applying it directly to that. But I love everything you're saying here. And I love seeing that effect on all the areas of your life. Like, I love seeing that with my clients. I always start doing an intake in all the areas of our life, because partly it's just to look for patterns and to get some awareness, and partly it's to help you decide where you want to focus first. But then the other main part is so that later down the road, we can reanalyze all those categories, and you can see how I have a client right now who just was working on time management and said we saw his relationships jump up, and it was like a low one before, and now that it's really high, which didn't seem at all connected to time management, but it totally was. So it's so funny to see how you do one thing is how you do everything. So when you change one thing, everything starts to change.
And I think it's the super common misconception that we think we have to be unaccepting of ourselves and our current circumstance to get a different circumstance. But when we actually become extremely accepting of ourselves and our circumstance, and accepting of the fact that we created those circumstances for ourselves, and that's not 100% true.
We create our results.
We create our results, but we don't create our circumstances. We cannot control our circumstances, but we can control our results by what we do with the uncontrollable circumstance. I want to make that clear, because I could say some very false things. But actually, that acceptance almost always will generate the results that we actually want faster than this, like, I'm never going to accept this. I'm not performing well enough. I'm not doing the right things. This performance or this circumstance or these results in my life are unacceptable. It's like, actually, they are acceptable. And if you learn to accept them, that's when suddenly the results start to come to you.
Yeah.
It's super counterintuitive. It's hard to do in practice, but the coaching really helps.
It's like, what is your relationship with failure? That's really what you're describing. What is your relationship with failure? Does it stop you? Does failure stop you from accomplishing things? Because if failure is a negative thing in your life, then you're going to probably continue to fail more than you want to, but you won't progress the way you want to. That's the real thing. You're not progressing. If failure is a positive thing in your life, you're like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to keep going. I'm good with where I'm at, and I'm going to just keep going. Then you're like, failure just is just little mini milestones in between. It's like that really bad scene that you shot, and then better. And so then next time, you need those things. You have to progress in that way. You have to. And if you can't accept that that's the way progression works, then you're going to have a really hard time. And I'm still working on that.
I think that's super awesome. I love that idea of like, what's your relationship with failure? Because it's like, are we good friends, or do I hate him? If I personify failure, do I never want failure to be around? But really, failure, we should be good friends with failure. We should be really comfortable with failure and let him into our lives as often as possible, because if we're comfortable with failing big, we are willing to do, like what you were saying about becoming tolerant of risk and the potential failure, right? Is at the other side of risk. That's what risk is, right? It's the potential for success versus failure.
And success is always on the other side of a big pile of failures. So.
Yeah. And so the people who are really, really comfortable with failure, high tolerance for it, and maybe even good friends with it, like, Brooke Castillo talks about this. She talks about, like, you're not failing big enough. And if you're not failing big enough, you're not progressing fast enough. And you could be progressing more if you were willing to set a goal that felt extremely unrealistic, or willing to drive for something that felt impossible. And if you're really comfortable with failure, you'll say, yeah, I know that's impossible. There's a great line from a movie that I like called Amazing Grace, where he says, no one our age has taken power. He's speaking to his friend, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who I can't remember all the names anyway, and he's talking about running for parliament or prime minister, and he said no one our age has taken power, and he said, which is why we're too young to know that certain things are impossible, so we'll do them anyway. And it's just this idea of like saying, maybe I do know it's impossible. I mean, he was kind of saying that basically with his own statement. He was like, yeah, well, we kind of know that that's impossible, but what if we just did it anyway? What if we just tried for this thing that no one thinks is able to exist or happen? And maybe it's not, impossible. Maybe it's just something we think is impossible for us. We've seen other people do it, but that's often the case, is we just say, well, they could do it, but I can't. That's not in the cards for me, or my circumstances are different, so I can't achieve the same things. And we can just say, okay, maybe it's impossible. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm okay with failing, and I'm going to fail lots of times until I get it. So, man, I just love that. I love that relationship with failure thing. I'm going to write it down.
I've written a whole sort of like, I don't know. It's like, I think I shared it with Anna originally. Yeah. I think the writing was actually pretty, spot on to like how it really feels to be in that space where you should be more accepting of failure, and you're not, and you're trying to find that sort of like, how can I just be okay with like screwing up? I was thinking, sorry, I thought when you were talking, I was thinking about that. We shared our movies with each other, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but you were like, oh, we don't want to watch my movie. And you were like, oh, don't, this is bad. And you were like, you were cringing at your own stuff or whatever, And what's funny was like mine probably technically had a lot more cringeworthy things in it. But I swear, like, it's just such a weird thing. And this is part of how I've changed, is like, I've become way more accepting of myself. And every time I watch my movie, it's like my one good thing that I like. But every time I watch it, even though people will point out, like my wife will be like, oh, I never noticed that this happened. I'm like, oh, I didn't either, But every time I watch it, I feel better about it. It's weird. And I'll admit, like, I'm not very good at being vulnerable. I think I once thought I was. Like, I am in some areas. Like, I cry at movies more than my wife, and and so like I got emotions, and I'm very cool with that, but I've not shared that video or that film publicly. And like I keep saying, oh, I just need to change that one thing before I put it on. I just changed it, and that's what it's been for a long time. Like, I love it, but I'm really at this point where, like, the only thing stopping me from just taking the time to do it this time. It really isn't an emotional, like, I can't share that with people because they might think this or they might think that, or it's just a representation of my failure. I'm showing everybody my failure, but I think that's vulnerability, is right. Like, just being able to say, I am not perfect, and I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with people seeing that, and I'm not going to try to hide it or justify myself. It's the reality, like even with your kids or something, you say something mean to them and you go, I'm sorry. I said something mean. There's no like, I said something mean because, or, like you were being really naughty. And, it's like, no, like that's just mean. And I don't know. I'm just saying there's that feeling that you have with it. I've gotten a little bit better. And I'm also, like, I should say right now, I still have a hard time with a lot of things. And it's not by any means like everything is perfect and I'm the best guy ever. Like I've definitely got a lot of work to do, but I feel so much better about it. I feel like I can do it.
You bring up another really crucial sort of core coaching concept, which is just the definition of confidence, which is this ability to fail in front of people and just being okay with that. And so something Anna and I have noticed is that we've noticed it a lot, but another person who specifically I just noticed recently was David F. Sandberg, who directed Shazam. He directed, his first movie was Lights Out. He made a short film called Lights Out that was like 4 minutes long, and it went super viral. Maybe it was shorter than that. And then he made a feature version of that in Hollywood, and it made tons of money. And then he made Annabelle 2, and then he made Shazam, which was, a big movie. And so he's had this like meteoric career, but before that he was depressed and felt like he wasn't doing anything in his life at all. And he just talks about like every short film I've ever made, I felt like was total garbage. And he's like, I've shared every single one. I just upload them. And he shares them. He shares them a lot. Even some of his old high school stuff, he'll show clips of and like little stuff from. And he's like, yeah, I mean, this is terrible. and he's like, this is really bad. And I bet he felt that way about Lights Out, that short that pretty much created his career for him. I think people really liked it, and I think he thought it was trash. He might not have liked it very much. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he felt some pride on that one, but he's openly said that most of the stuff he makes he feels like is really bad, and he just puts it out there. And that's something Anna and I pointed out to each other. We were like, this is one of the most common traits we've noticed about people that really make it, is that they make a lot of stuff and they share it. And so few of us share the work we do because we're just like, no, I can't let that represent me. It's like, actually I can. And it does represent me. It's the best thing I've done to date, and I'm going to put it out there and I'm going to make another one. And you know what's funny is I think our inability to share it sometimes is what creates our inability to create the next thing. And if we just share it and put it out there, maybe it kind of hastens the work a little bit.
You can move on.
Well, not just I can move on, but like I need to move on. I need to make something that gets to the top of the queue right now and pushes that thing lower. And so like, you know, and then I'll make another thing and then another. And then pretty soon you're making a lot of films, and what happens when you make a lot of films is you learn the craft and you get comfortable with it. And that's the thing that most people just never do. And so, yeah, confidence, being comfortable with failing. That's awesome.
Well, this has been a really good discussion. We're actually running short on time. I thought we were going to have to talk about Georgia more, and I like where the conversation has gone. We haven't even talked about Georgia that much, and that's okay.
I guess just spending one weekend with you, I already know that I talk too much and your husband talks too much, and you put us in a room together, and I don't know, it might be 2 a.m. and you're like, oh, what happened?
Yeah.
So this is a very long
podcast. This is the 5-hour podcast.
Welcome to part 5 of our interview with Redge.
Yeah, that did happen.
That weekend was a very talkative weekend.
That was fun.
It was awesome.
It was great. Well, I do have one more question for you, because I just know there's people out there who feel the exact same way that you do, or that we have talked about, and they're thinking about deciding to do this film and family thing, or to make some big decision in their career or their family moving forward. Do you remember, I know it's going back a ways, but do you remember why you decided to do it? And did you have any doubts, or what would you say to someone who's maybe thinking about trying this?
Do I remember why? I have historically done a lot of I've read a lot of self-help books and things like that. When I say that, mostly in business context, I was encouraged with one of my jobs to read books, and they would even give you a raise to read if you read certain books. And so it was like, of course I'm going to read these books. I'll get more money. But I think that, I tended to have a desire to prove myself, right? And I also want to be a humble person. I want to be teachable and be able to take feedback and etc. And so part of that is just in a desire to be like that, what's the next step I could do? But I mean, I'll be honest, part of it was just I've never done it before. Why not? What's it going to hurt? So in the spirit of humility and in the spirit of trying something new. And then I was just really curious how it works. I've always thought I gave people good advice and I could really help people if I had the chance. So it was like, she's coaching. I'm kind of curious how this works. And so I don't necessarily feel any more adequate. I don't feel like I would necessarily be any better at being a coach. In fact, I probably would be a hindrance in some ways, because the idea that I have good advice is probably not the good way to start as a coach. But I guess I just think that if someone's hesitant, I think that you just got to say, where am I at? Am I happy where I'm at? And what have I tried, and is it working? And if it's not working, what could work? And maybe this is something that could work. And if it's a possibility and you are not in a place where you want to be, then you might as well try something. You never know if it's the thing. And really the truth is it's not really about It's really about what you learn about yourself, this self-awareness and that. And if I could be truly humble and talk to the most intelligent person ever, and they just were like, you're kind of like this and this and this, and then I'm like, yeah, you're right, but people aren't like that, and there's not anybody that can really know you that well, and so you're the only one who can really break that barrier in your life. It'd be nice to have the guru of all gurus just slap like a stamp on your head that said, these are the things that are wrong with you, and this is what will help you become successful. But really, like, you're just stopping yourself. And so if you don't make effort to improve, then you won't improve. So I don't know. I'm rambling.
No, that was great. I didn't feel like rambling at all. No, I think this has been an awesome discussion. I really appreciate your time, Reg, coming on the podcast. And we will hopefully be able to catch up with you again. Maybe we'll have you on the podcast in a year or two, and
when you made your first feature. And
yeah.
And congrats on the baby that's coming pretty soon. Hopefully not too soon, but pretty soon. And we're happy to get to know you and Marissa, and we're excited for wherever your future takes you. So thanks so much for joining us and taking a good long, this was a long episode, but thanks for taking a good long chunk of your evening and joining us on it.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. It was fun.
All right. Well, that's about it for today. If you want a successful career making feature films and a happy family at the same time, visit invisiblemansion.com/film and family to apply for our next enrollment window in the Film and Family Academy, which closes July 1st, 2021. We only accept a select group of qualifying filmmakers each quarter.
And if you qualify, you'll receive private mentorship in addition to lifetime access to our library of courses. And our alumni are already realizing major career milestones and seeing dramatic transformations in their personal relationships. So if you don't want these results, don't apply.
And if you do, visit invisiblemansion.com/film and family and click apply before July 1st of this year.
Awesome.
We'll see you next time.
Yep, see you next time. Bye.
Bye.